Welcome. You've got
Digital Folklore.
Easy does it. We're bringing you up now. He's gonna feel. Yep, there we go. Hello there. Don't panic. Don't try to move. It's going to be okay. Stop squirming. You need to relax. Hello. You've been out for a while, but you're doing very well. Very well indeed.
What?
There we go.
Where am I?
Don't worry about that quite yet. We've got some tests to run. Unfortunately for you, they require you to be awake and aware.
Are you?
Just a little bit of calibration so we can synchronize your...
Why? Are there wires coming out of my head?
Hey, slow down, buddy. This isn't going to work if you're all riled up.
Don't you buddy me. I just woke up strapped to a table with wires coming out of my head.
Now
Let me
listen.
out of this place.
You're going to have to trust me. You've been through a lot just now, and one of the main things affected is your memory, okay? Now, I have a little series of test runs so that we can synchronize your neural activity and filter out some of the noise that is making you confused.
The only noise confusing me right now is the bull hockey issuing from below your filthy mustache.
My mustache is not filthy.
I can smell it from here.
And how do you know that's my mustache?
You had a ham sandwich for lunch.
Lucky guess. You can't...
Onions, Miracle Whip, romaine lettuce with the middle bits cut out.
You can't...
Yellow store brand mustard.
Okay, look.
On rye.
I have tests to run. And the sooner you cooperate, the sooner you can get out of here, okay?
Now I'm hungry.
Now, this isn't going to hurt per se, but it isn't exactly going to be comfortable. Lie back and talk me through what you experience. When I do this.
I'm sitting. I'm indoors. Some kind of industrial apartment? It's big, but it's kind of difficult to tell exactly how big because there is just so much stuff in here. I'm sitting next to one of those big wooden spools. You know, the ones that people think make a good rustic chic kind of table? It's got microphones poking out of it on these duct tape covered boom arms. I'm looking around a little bit more now. There's trash everywhere. I can't even make out the pattern on the carpet. There's a huge tape machine kitty-cornered against the wall. It looks ancient. I think. Yeah, that's an Ampex 300-3. Literally from the 1950s. And I can see, just kind of sitting on top of that tape deck, like a cheap Lenovo laptop. And it looks like... Yeah, okay. The screen of the laptop is on, and it's running Minecraft. What a weird room. Man, this place is trashed. Food wrappers, cardboard boxes, metal reels of tape, snipped off cable ends all over the floor. There are literal mountains of old electronics here, all busted open and disassembled for parts. The only thing here that looks organized is a bookshelf on the far wall. But it also looks like maybe it's never been touched. I think there are more rooms. I can see some... The door! Someone's opening the door! I've got to hide. I'm
We do these kind of meetings like at a coffee shop or maybe go have lunch.
I like my home.
Maybe we could do a Zoom.
I feel comfortable here.
Google Meet.
I don't feel creative in those places, and it's not the same over video call. It's just too much distraction.
And all these piles of junk, you get stuff constantly falling over. That's not distracting to you?
Not at all. It's kind of a reflection of what it's like inside my head.
They don't seem to have spotted me yet. I'm holding stock still, pressed into a closet. Weirdly, it seems like the only place that isn't full of garbage. They're still blabbering away. I don't know exactly why I'm here, but I don't necessarily feel like I'm allowed to be here. I don't recognize these people. I'm watching them through a crack in the door now. They're moving into the middle of the room. They're headed towards that spool table.
Teachers, and we want to be super clear that we're also students here.
It's tricky because we're both doing so much off-screen learning too, and since it's all new information to us, I worry that we'll accidentally skip over something crucial or miss the mark.
One of our goals is to make sure that this study of folklore is super accessible. So I think the fact that we're not explicitly experts could be a net positive.
Yeah.
And I feel like the crux of learning something new is these little aha moments that pop out here and there along the way. So as we're actively experiencing all these aha moments ourselves, we get to share those with the audience. We get to, express those through the show. And even if we miss the mark sometimes or end up covering the same topic from a few different angles, maybe those will be aha moments for somebody else who's listening.
I mean, I agree. That's a good point. I don't know. I get caught up in wanting to do the best, most accurate presentation possible, and that's kind of hard when you're sharing your own journey of learning something new, on top of trying to make it like immersive and fun and engaging. Plus, I feel a little bit like the more I learn about folklore, the more I realize how much I actually don't know about it.
Yeah.
Which is true of anything, right? But I just don't usually make a podcast out of that process.
Yeah, I mean, here's where I am with it. I think we just have to try because we do have a ticking clock behind us right now. We said publicly that the first episode drops in January, and that's like coming up really fast.
It is coming up fast. I mean, I do have the episode 1 rough cut finished. I don't know. I just keep tinkering with it. We have so much interview tape already. Something I just finished the other day. I cut up our interview with Jeana Jorgenson, and I made some great clips that are like direct definitions of some folklore concepts.
That interview was so good. She brought a lot to the discussion.
Yeah, and she's fantastic at explaining things. The clips are great. I just don't know exactly how to fit them into the episodes that we have planned.
Okay. What are we working with?
So the length varies quite a bit. I have the reel hooked up right now.
Yeah, why don't we just listen to those together and we can figure it out?
Yeah. So the first clip is just a really good take on defining what folklore is. It's just a little bit long. It's like 5-ish minutes.
Maybe slim it down a bit?
I tried. I tried to cut out a lot, but literally every word in it is kind of important. And I don't think I can cut more out without losing context. I'll just roll it and see what you think.
Okay.
I really like the definition that my colleague Lynn McNeil gives of folklore in her book Folklore Rules. Folklore is informally transmitted traditional culture, and we do have to kind of break those parts down a little bit as well. So culture is everything that we have to know and learn and understand to thrive in a society and know its unspoken rules. A couple of important facets of culture. Culture is transmitted rather than inherited. Nobody is born with culture. Nobody pops out of the womb knowing what's polite versus what's impolite. Culture is not in our genes. It is something we learn through human interaction from the moment we are brought into this world. Culture is also not universal. Culture is something, again, that is going to be really shaped by historical and geographical factors, depending on where and when you are in the world. And culture is also maintained and enforced in different ways. At least in the modern West, we have a number of institutions that maintain culture. We have the government, we have education, we have medicine, we have the criminal justice system, all of these things that are responsible for enforcing norms and rules. Now, in contrast to all of that, folklore is informal. Folklore is less institutional. If you decide to break the law for some reason, there might be severe consequences for that. If you tell a joke badly, there's maybe not severe consequences for that. I don't know. I mean, maybe you just revealed that you're a bigot, and that does have some consequences for you, but you're not going to land in jail for telling a joke the wrong way or messing up a proverb or whatever. So when we say that folklore is informally transmitted traditional culture, we're saying folklore is a very important part of culture, but it's not transmitted and maintained by institutions the same way that education is, the same way that medicine is, the same way that the law is. So folklore is informal. That's what that means. We also mean that folklore is traditional, as in it is passed along intentionally rather than something that is completely new every single time. So tradition often has this connotation of being centuries old or millennia old, and that is just not true. Traditions can be new, traditions can be emergent. But what traditions do have is some form of continuity or stability over time. You can point at dots on a line at different texts that we have collected and say, that and that and that, look at that. Those things are really similar. Those things are in the same type of thing. They're the same genre, perhaps. They're the same kind of urban legend or holiday custom or whatever. So when we say that folklore is traditional, we really just mean it's been passed along for some period of time, and we have documented that. So my favorite definition in folklore is informally transmitted traditional culture. I also like a couple other definitions. Dan Benamos says artistic communication in small groups. So again, it's accessing that idea of groups of people who share something, share an identity, share values, share, again, some kind of linking factor. And the fact that it's artistic communication means it's marked off from other types of culture. It's marked off from other types of interaction. And we say instead, aha, when you say a priest and a rabbi walk into a bar, I am signaling with this linguistic framing, I'm not just going to tell you any old anecdote. This one is special. This one is a joke. This is going to be funny. Or if I say once upon a time, again, there's a marker or a formula that says we are shifting out of everyday conversation into something like magical, like a different realm. One important note that I like to include along with these thoughts on what folklore is that none of these definitions include anything about truth value. The definition of folklore does not hinge on whether it's true or not. It hinges on how it's transmitted, the fact that it's more peer-to-peer than top-down forms of culture. There's community evaluation, but there's not straight-up gatekeeping, like Hollywood gatekeeps who can release movies and things of that nature. So again, calling something folklore is more about how it is transmitted than what the content of it actually is. And so this is part of how we can link really disparate genres of folklore. Like what does it actually have in common when I say quilting is a kind of folklore, fairy tales are a kind of folklore, folk medicine is a kind of folklore? These things look drastically different from one another. Like, quilting is a material thing that exists in the world that's made of fabric. Fairy tales are verbal artistry with lots of magic in them. And so on. So even the genres of folklore, different examples of folklore might look very different than one another. What links them and what makes them all folklore is that they are transmitted in these informal ways and they are tapping into tradition every time they are told.
Yeah, that is extremely good. I see what you mean. It'd be hard to cut anything out there without losing something big.
Yeah.
What are the other clips?
The second one is Jeana describing what folklore isn't.
Yeah, I remember that was one of your questions, wasn't it?
Yeah, I said something like, folklore is so much broader than I realized, so what's the delineation between any communication and folkloric communication? And I think what she said was really enlightening here.
So I tend to use two criteria to determine if something is folklore: multiple existence and variation. So you need to document something existing in more than one time and place. And this goes back to tradition, right? Tradition is establishing continuity and stability of a thing existing. So if somebody tells me a really intriguing story, but that's the only version of it in existence, that's probably not folklore, right? Folklore needs to be transmitted within and by a folk group. So I need to see some kind of traditional existence, even if it's a very small group of people with this particular item of folklore. If it only exists in one place ever told by one person, it may not be folklore, so it just failed the multiple existence test. Variation is the other test. Tradition and variation are kind of twin or pair concepts in folklore. So tradition is continuity and variation is novelty. And we see this because, somebody could tell a joke and I could retell the same joke and you'd be like, okay, that's recognizably the same joke. The priest and the rabbi walked into the bar, whatever. But I can mix up the words and still have the same meaning and hopefully still hit the punchline. So tradition and variation mean that you are conveying the same idea or the same traditional side of things, while variation gives you the freedom to put your own spin on it. And we see this especially differentiating folklore from pop culture and the mass media, because for the most part, once a movie has been filmed, it is the same text. It doesn't matter whether I see it in the movie theater or I watch it on Netflix or some other streaming service. I'm watching frame for frame the same exact thing that everyone else is. Same thing with if you are publishing a newspaper article or a novel or something like that. no matter where you read it on your Kindle, read it on a website, read it in print, you're probably reading the same word for word text literally, no matter which medium you're seeing it in. So those fail the variation test, right? So it is the same static text. There's no room to put your own spin on it. It has been mediated by gatekeepers rather than by the folk. And of course, we do get interesting sort of gray area case studies like fan fiction, which is where someone takes a pop culture text and says, well, I think so-and-so should have actually got together with this other character instead, and they write it or do whatever. That is more people putting their own variation on something that has been composed by someone else. So there are always going to be a couple of gray areas, I guess. Culture is inherently kind of messy, and we like to have categories in academic studies, but it doesn't always pan out to the real world. But for the most part, if you are just sort of new to the study of folklore, you're like, wow, is everything folklore? The answer is probably no. Look for multiple existence and look for variation.
This clip really stuck in my brain. Even though it's kind of trying to define a negative, it really helped me.
Especially with a subject as expansive as this, it's helpful at the jump to kind of have some clear guardrails. Something I'm noticing, though, is that we are talking about folklore in general. I know we talked to her specifically about digital folklore as well. Were you able to pull anything from that?
Yeah. Actually, the next clip, second to last one, is just a hair over 2 minutes. We asked her about how the internet has changed folklore, and she said this.
I think the internet changed folklore in a handful of ways. It made communication more rapid and accessible for larger numbers of people than ever before in some ways. So it was a game changer. There are a number of small folk groups that existed prior to the internet that still exist. But, we would have to find fellow science fiction fans and other little niche groups through like newsletters and physically mailing out things to try to find your people and going to little conventions and gatherings and so on. So if you think about all of these niche hobby groups that, do share folklore and are a folk group, suddenly you meet thousands of people worldwide and you can just all instantaneously be in touch with each other. So I would say one significant thing the internet has done is allowed folk groups to more rapidly reach each other and establish shared identity and values and create new shared folklore. So I guarantee you, for any niche hobby group or whatever, they've now got a Reddit page, they've got a Facebook page, they've got a whatever, they're sharing and making memes. There are a number of folk groups that are inherently as well kind of isolated, either because the groups themselves are very stigmatized, so people who are into more marginalized aspects of things such as LGBTQ identities, kink identities, non-monogamous identities, and so on. It's easier to find each other using pseudonyms on the internet now, as well as people who are isolated for just more logistics reasons, like people who are disabled or perhaps immunocompromised. So the internet has been a major source of community and connection for a lot of these folk groups. So that's been pretty notable. Technology sort of adjacent to the internet as well has, I think, facilitated the creation of folklore. So, could I draw a cat meme? I don't know. I could try. It wouldn't look too good. I'm not an artist. But I can use, a click of something on a website, a few clicks later, and I've got a cat meme. And it's been recaptioned the way I want it, or, the Morpheus Matrix meme or whatever. So in terms of making tools accessible to people, the fact that you can do voice recordings now, the fact that you can create a video using your phone rather than need to go out and buy a camcorder. So I think that there are a lot of ways in which the internet and its adjacent technologies have revolutionized the making and sharing of folklore and the connection of folk groups.
Nice. That's excellent. I love the emphasis on folk groups and that the internet has enabled those to form more easily. I also think the mention of online tools and resources is super appropriate here.
Yeah, it's wicked cool. That bit was something that didn't really hit my brain until she said it. How we have so many more ways not only to share and connect with each other, but also to create things more easily and quickly. I'm thinking of stuff like imgflip.com for making memes, or even Canva for graphic design, web apps like those that are really accessible without having a big learning curve, or even a lot of the free and open source software tools that are coming out, which actually, hold on a sec, I want to make a note.
Are you angling of doing a deep dive into the folkloric concepts of open source coding?
Yes, that's exactly it. But I mean, probably not for season one, but I think it could be interesting.
We'd probably want to cover that in a way that doesn't require listeners to understand like assembler language or C++ or Java or anything like that, but it could be fun. So think about that for season 2.
Yeah, I'll tuck this in the back of my mind, maybe poke around for some ideas later. So we have just one more clip from the Jeana interview, at least out of all the stuff that I've cleaned up and cataloged. Honestly, the whole interview was really good. I think we should probably release it at some point in its entirety.
Yeah, I agree.
But one last clip. It's about 2 minutes long where Jeana talks about the value of studying folklore.
Cool.
I'd say there's a lot of value. I'd class it primarily at 2 levels to communicate to people. First is, no matter what you enjoy in life, it is probably influenced by folklore on some level. If you're a foodie, well, what do you think people were doing before we could get mass market preserved foods and order foods? It was recipes in your family that were passed down folklorically. What did we do before refrigeration? It was preserving things, whether by canning or putting things in a cellar. That all came from folklore. That is traditionally passed along informal modes of knowledge, right? So no matter what you enjoy, if you like Marvel movies, a lot of those stories connect to fairy tales, legends, and myths. So again, no matter what you like as a person, as a hobbyist, as someone who's into creative things, I guarantee you there's a connection to folklore somehow. So that would be my first bid for value. My second bid for value is more scholarly in nature, and it's more about how humans interact with each other in the world. Perhaps you have a religion, maybe there's some family folklore that you have, maybe in your career there's a set of insider knowledge and jokes and things like that kind of folklore. So by looking at someone's multiple identities or folk groups, we can also start to see how people affiliate with one another and how we learn to communicate and share our value systems and things of that nature. So on a more serious note, folklore can not only be social glue in sort of a positive, constructive way, but folklore can be the dark side of that as well. Folklore is also found in stereotypes, in moral panics, in urban legends, and conspiracy theories, and rumors, things of that nature that create barriers between self and other that delineate we are the good protected class, those people are out to get us. So that's very much the dark side of folklore, is that it can maintain and construct social identities and groups. It can also tear those down and create villains that then sometimes face real-world consequences for being othered. So by studying folklore, we can tap into these processes, how they're happening, when and where, and maybe intervene.
Such a great way to put that.
Agreed. It does kind of encompass ideas from all of the other clips that I pulled, but I think it puts more weight on the fact that it's a field worth studying because of the real-world impact on just about everything.
I also think that it's important as an idea to impart in our podcast as a whole.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. The question just remains of where in the season do we put these?
Maybe we could do like a Folklore 101 episode at the very end of season 1, or even 2 episodes, like 9 and 10, covering various topics more directly like that. Or we have that interview with Jeana. Maybe we can get somebody like Lynn McNeil to come talk to us and cover some of the basics of folklore, how that's evolved and where digital folklore fits in, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. We can just press forward and get some experience, see what happens.
Cap off the season by tying together all of the things we learned along the way.
Exactly. Otherwise, we'll just sit and spin forever on this thing.
I do have a habit of putting the cart before the horse and convincing myself I've invented the automobile.
What? Okay, wait. No. Something's wrong.
What?
The younger dude. Brown hair. All of a sudden he turned into you. Sprouted a stinky mustache and everything. My hair guy didn't even seem to notice.
No, that's bad. That's bad. I'm moving you out.
Okay, we're going
That?
to reset and try again.
I feel like I don't know those people, but they seem weirdly familiar.
I believe that was Perry and Mason. At least it should have been.
Like that old TV show?
No relation, but I bet they hear that a lot.
Is that getting rebooted?
No, I'm adjusting the parameters
No,
to...
the show. Perry Mason. I'm pretty sure they just started releasing new episodes again.
Oh, no, I have no idea. I don't watch TV. Anyways, I think we're set for the next procedure. This time I shouldn't insert myself into your memories. I didn't realize it, but I was standing on one of the cables.
Wait,
They're very sensitive.
one of the cables attached to my head?
Yes.
Okay, if you're going to force me to go through this nonsense, I would appreciate it if you were at least just a little bit careful. Are these cables connected to my brain?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Directly, actually. Like plugged into it. Well, hey, would you look at the time? We gotta get moving. Try to stay as calm as you possibly can, okay?
Stay calm?
Here
I don't even know
we go.
You need to tell me what you see. I'm serious. If you want to get out of there, you need to walk me through what you're experiencing.
Fine. I think I'm in the same place as before. I see the same disaster mess of a room, except I'm under a different table, a desk, and I'm holding two ends of a cable together. What? Oh. Okay. I don't know how I know this, but Mason asked me to do this. I'm holding together the power cable for his computer. I had cut through it, probably a few days before this moment. This is weird. It's like little bits of context are flooding back. I remember Mason said that he had an important Zoom call to do, and that if I was going to cut through his cables, that I was going to help fix them. So yeah, I'm back in that place, carefully holding the bare ends of this live electrical wire together. Hey, if I get hurt in this dream or whatever, do I get hurt in real life? Great. Thanks for being so helpful, Doc. I can't exactly move. I can tell he's on the call right now. I think I'm just sort of stuck here. My nose
Thought that
itches.
occurred to me. Something that we get to do now because of the open nature of the majority of the internet is peek into other folk groups we don't necessarily belong to. Because whereas with oral tradition, you would have your family folk group, your friends, whatever communities or hobbies or job or whatever you're around. And I feel like that's inherently different about the internet.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's pros and cons to this, right? Where it's really exciting that for the first time, you're able to have really close-knit communities with their own language and tenets and belief systems that are not based on geographical location. So it allows for people to, find their people. On the other hand, this is how QAnon happens, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing with folklore in general that is really worth discussing. It is often viewed not just as antiquated, but as very quaint and cute. There's this cottagecore energy to the way that people view folklore. And that is sometimes true, but folklore is not a cutesy, innocuous thing. It is how you end up with incels. It is how you end up with QAnon. And it's always been that way. This isn't a new internet thing. Changelings are one I referenced earlier, where the descriptions of changeling children in traditional stories, they almost exactly mirror descriptions of common birth defects and congenital disorders. For those unfamiliar, a changeling is in usually a Scottish, Irish, English, Celtic folklore. It's when the fairies steal your baby and replace it with a fairy baby. Your baby's been taken off to fairyland, and now you have this fairy baby in your house, which looks a lot like your baby, but you can tell it's not quite the same. And so it was this way for parents with a child with a birth defect or a child who may be sickly in some way to say, oh, no, this isn't my baby. This is a fairy baby. So on the one hand, you have this way of if a child is maybe passing away, for the parents to feel more peace with that their child is actually somewhere safe. But you also have this insidious other side of that where changeling stories always end with how to get rid of the changeling and get your own baby back. And that involves putting the changeling in a fire, or leaving the changeling at low tide and waiting for high tide to come in. And so it's essentially a socially acceptable form of infanticide fueled by this story. There's a famous court case where a man convinced a whole town that his wife was a changeling and they killed her. And then in court, his argument was she was a changeling.
Really? I had not heard of that.
If you look at it on the surface, folklore, it is like pretty and whimsical, and that is its purpose. Its purpose is to take something that's too much to talk about without that whimsy and drape whimsy over it in a way to obscure it, both to allow people to address things, but also sometimes for harm.
Yeah, we're community creatures. And as you start to fall into this community and get to know these people, you feel an inherent desire to defend or take on some of the aspects of things and what they believe in. And particularly when there's stories that are pervasive and things like that, it really is an effective way to get into people's heads.
And it's like it feeds into itself, which, I mean, that's one of the things about folklore and the folkloric process that is so fascinating to me, is that it's almost alive on its own. It is this breathing thing that has a way of surviving, and it like feeds off our belief.
Yeah, and there was in Jeana Jorgenson's book, Folklore 101, I'm going to paraphrase this horribly. She said something along the lines of folklore is a way to have a look into the like what is actually on people's minds and what they're keeping alive. And it's interesting how currently everything is such a conglomeration of older things and new things mashing up in this weird way.
This is the perfect segue to talk about this thing that I was really hoping we'd get to talk about. Have you guys ever heard of the Gutenberg parentheses?
No.
Oh my gosh, strap in. You're going to love this. Okay, so there is a scholar named Thomas Petit, I think his name is pronounced, and I believe he coined this idea. Professor L.O. Sauerberg of the University of Southern Denmark. Okay, that is who came up with this idea. But, you know, it's being told by a number of people. I think Petit was one of them. But the concept of it is that before the invention of Gutenberg's printing press, oral communication was the predominant means of passing along information, right? So the folkloric process was the predominant means of communication. And what I mean by that is, you know, with oral tradition, it is multi-authored, not single-authored. It is spoken, not written down, which means that it is transient, it's shifting. It is not static the way that literate culture is static. It is sort of transmitted from person to person to person, and it shifts with each new transmission. That was the way most information and storytelling functioned before the printing press. With the invention of the printing press, literate culture took over as being the predominant culture-making sort of style, I guess. So suddenly, the predominant means of communication became static, written, single-authored, and literate. Now, that remained the case up until the internet. So now that the internet is in full swing, suddenly we have gone back to a much more oral style of communication where we get our information from multiple authors. Like it's done to the people instead of to sort of like the elites that have this control and gatekeep of the information. It is like constantly shifting. It is contributed to by many different people, many different sources. You know, that's how something like Slender Man comes to be, is like you've got all these different contributors. And so essentially, for the first time since before the invention of the printing press, the folkloric process has once again become the predominant means of communication. However, the main difference between the original oral tradition and the internet version of that is, well, two things. One, it is incredibly expedited. So something that would have taken years to travel around the world, centuries even, now takes a matter of seconds. And two, there is kind of a paper trail. We can go back and find the very first Slender Man piece and find a single author who created it. So it's become this sort of hybridity between literate culture and oral culture with a bit of a lean toward the oral. So that is the Gutenberg parenthesis.
So this is something that we've talked about a fair amount with different people that we've been interviewing, but I don't think it's ever quite been put in that context, and that is really a lot to chew on.
Sure. And I mean, I think it's sort of that same paradox that folklore collectors were grappling with in terms of collecting oral tradition, which is as soon as you do collect those pieces and make them static, they are no longer in the form that made them folklore because you brought them into a literate form. I think that there is this movement to collect and preserve oral tradition, and I imagine that there will be a very similar movement to collect and preserve internet culture. And I know that, like, you know, at University of Indiana, Bloomington, for example, where they have one of the world's leading folklore graduate programs, a number of the students in that program are studying internet culture. So I think there's already movement to try and preserve these things. But I do also think that the very nature of a folkloric anything is that it's impossible to preserve all of it because there are infinite versions of every piece of information, and that's what makes it what it is.
I think it's an interesting byproduct of the hybridity of it that it is both static and text-based and has a paper trail, and also very changing that it's like that. And there is a lot of archiving effort. There's the big ones like Know Your Meme and Internet Archive, but then there's also all sorts of whatever micro community you're in, you'll find people stashing away things on Google Drives and passing around links to stuff that doesn't exist anymore.
And even so, it's still all digital. It's not actually a paper trail. You know, if there's some sort of global catastrophe and just the internet doesn't exist anymore, you know, that is lost.
The Gutenberg parentheses is something that's really interesting to me that I've never thought of in that way. And I haven't ever heard of it, so I haven't had much time to chew on it. But the medium itself, and like you said, the hybridity between oral culture and static printed literate culture, immediately my brain is spinning on parallels between disinformation and misinformation, botting and astroturfing, and those kinds of things that happen to try and create what feels like a fake upswell of support for something. But I imagine that always happened.
Yeah, I mean, propaganda has always existed in oral tradition and in literate. And I mean, the thing is, too, with the parentheses, it's not like folklore went away during the era of the printing press and in the pre-internet, post-Gutenberg time. But I just find it a really interesting thing to think about, especially in terms of internet culture, how it's shifting the way, or the predominant way that we communicate with each other, and how so often folklore is viewed as this form that exists in antiquity, when it really is very, very similar to this incredibly modern means of communication.
Yeah, that's something that we...
Oh man, I swear to every god ever, I am going to lose my mind if this itch doesn't go away. Hey, Doc, can you hear me? Does your weird brain torture box have a setting to make my nose stop itching? Or is that too much to ask? Okay, I can do this. Just turn my head slowly. Focus on my hands. Don't...
Oh, big oof. That is not ideal, huh?
Did I just die?
Oh, no. I think you just scared yourself out of the memory.
But I just got big shocked.
Oh, yeah, you did. And you must have before.
What?
Like IRL, whenever this happened in the past.
Can you please just answer one question for me?
Yes.
When you hit that switch...
Ooh, sorry, pal. That was your one question. You said, can you please just answer one question?
You are a child!
Hey, come on.
You are a giant child with a bad mustache!
I try to make things light and fun around here. You don't have to be mean.
When you hit that switch, and I am suddenly transported somewhere else, what is happening exactly?
Ah, yes. Basically, we're redirecting your sensory input and connecting it directly to different subsections of your hippocampus. So basically, we're wiring up your consciousness to different memories, and you're reliving them in as much detail as possible. I bet it feels really cool.
It doesn't feel cool. What is the point of this? Why me?
We have to calibrate your new implant, otherwise it won't be able to understand anything except the present moment, and that would be very confusing for you.
My new implant?
It'll all make sense. Don't worry. One more test.
I don't. Every time. It's like having your brain folded inside out. Hey, I'm somewhere different this time. It's dark. I can see some light peeking through up ahead. I think I'm inside a ceiling? It's extremely dusty. I'm making my way towards that light. Ugh. Okay, never mind. It's those two again. Yup. I'm definitely in a ceiling. That light was just a hole. Above the big tape machine. I can see them sitting at that ugly table. I think they're having a meeting.
And doing a lot of networking and marketing. I mean, you've been doing most of the networking and marketing. I've kind of kept my head down, buried in the writing and editing and sound design part.
But honestly, though, it's impressive what you've been able to pull off editing on physical tape.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten pretty good with an X-Acto knife.
I mean, numbers-wise, we're doing really well for a brand new show that doesn't have celebrity hosts or any of that.
Right.
I'm really happy with the community on Discord. They're all welcoming and fun to talk to. Growing our Patreon, not a lot yet, but that's all right. We're only 4 episodes deep at this point. We've got a feed with Cautionary Tales coming up, one of our favorite shows. And this next episode, I was thinking about pivoting to a new idea.
Oh? Like next episode, episode 5, which is deep dive on urban legends specifically, right?
Yeah, but I had a thought.
What's the thought?
I actually just realized I don't want to tell you.
Okay.
I think it would be better as surprise.
I don't. I'm already lagging behind on trimming down the backlog of interviews. I don't want a surprise.
It'll be fun.
Okay. So now episode 5 is going to be a surprise. A surprise to me. Me, the person who edits the show.
You'll like it. Plus, it's the halfway point of the season, so it's perfect time to shake things up a little bit narratively.
Right. I'm well aware that there's absolutely nothing I can say that will persuade you otherwise, so cool. I guess I'll just be along for the ride. But if we're going to talk about shaking things up a little bit, I kind of wanted to talk about the format of the show.
Like the overall format of the show?
Yeah, because it's weird.
I mean, it is, but that's part of the fun of it, right?
Yeah, I agree. I like that it's weird. I think it's more interesting to be weird. Mm-hmm. But I feel like I don't know. I feel like I'm building invisible walls around how an episode could or should sound, which is something I feel like I always do when I work on projects, like trying to make a system that the show operates inside of. But I was just stewing on the fact that, like, episode 1 is so different from all of the other episodes so far.
Yeah, it's a totally different style. I mean, that's the first one that we put together. It was at the very, very early stages, and I remember it took a really long time as well.
Yeah, it did for sure. But, like, I wonder if we should experiment more with the way we present the show. Not necessarily in a way that makes each episode take more time to produce, but just, like, I don't know, switch it up a little bit. See what people like.
What are you thinking?
Nothing specific, really. Just the idea that we have an infinite playground. With the way that Digital Folklore is set up, I feel like we could try on a lot of different styles and ideas.
As in, always keep the format changing and shifting? I would worry a little bit that the listeners might not know what to expect.
I guess I was kind of thinking more like we would experiment early on and just sort of see what worked best, what people liked the most, and then stick with it. But actually, I kind of like that idea, keeping it fluid all the time. I think that could be really fun. But also, it'd be pretty easy for us to get lost in the weeds.
Yeah, no. It's important that we make sure that we're always delivering on the premise of the show.
100% for sure.
People are coming for the information, but
right.
The framing and the style should be the hook. I think that the information that we're delivering should inform and dictate the style or the frame of the episode.
But also, it could be kind of fun if it didn't and we just presented stuff in a different way. Like, I've always wanted to make a film noir episode of a podcast. But what you said about people not knowing what to expect, I think that's something that's tricky. because I know we've gotten some feedback that our format isn't everyone's cup of tea, and like the show itself is kind of inherently hard to describe. I've actually started telling people that it's kind of like Scooby-Doo if Scooby-Doo was also a documentary.
Yeah, I've done similar. I've said that it's kind of like Mythbusters, but if Mythbusters were on the History Channel.
I like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's all trying to find the right analogy, right, so that people get what we're going for and the semi-cartoonish nature of it all.
Yeah, and it's just trying to make sure that people know what they're getting into, right? But also, I kind of want to feel out what the audience likes in terms of presentation.
Part of the problem comes back to that it's really difficult to get feedback in podcasting. Like, there are reviews on Apple Podcasts, but it's a big extra step for somebody to leave feedback there. And the feedback that they do leave is naturally motivated. It's going to be the people that were motivated enough to do something. And so it's all positive or it's all negative. There's no in between.
Yeah, I mean, we've had some kind of mean reviews come in.
Yeah, we also had a lot of really nice ones that kind of we can hang on to and really know that we're doing the right thing and building the right kind of audience.
That's true. I mean, maybe something we could do is encourage people to email us and let us know what they think. Or maybe we could do like a survey or something at the end of each season. We could do it with the people in our Discord server or something like a Google form that we link to.
Yeah, or SurveyMonkey. I don't think that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
We could ask questions like which episodes are people's favorites, what they think about the various formats, what topics are most interesting, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Somewhat related, I've been kicking around the idea of doing a Q&A episode where we get folklore-related questions from our listeners, and we reach out to some of the experts that we've met to get some answers.
People could like email us or send in voice memos, and then that'd be a cool way to get our community involved directly.
Mm-hmm.
I can try and set up a way to organize that, like on the back end, and then we could tell people probably also at the end of the season, like along with the survey.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. We could maybe do the Q&A episode between seasons. We'll have to figure out the timing and when we can get everything together, but I think it's something that the listeners would really enjoy.
No, I like that idea a lot.
Oh, and also, if we do that survey, we could ask listeners a really, really important question.
Okay.
On the scale of 1 to 10, what's their opinion of Digby?
Okay. Yep. No, I don't think that's necessary, Perry. Digby's like the only thing people tweet about the show. So
it's not the only thing.
I don't think we should take him for granted.
Where is he, anyway?
I don't know. He's around here somewhere. Probably sleeping. He was up all night reorganizing the tape bin.
It's a miracle you guys get anything done.
I'm telling you, man. Digby's pretty smart.
Hey, what was that? I felt that thing. Like it was inside my... Ah!
You're done.
Every time.
You're all set.
I swear, I will get a lawyer.
We'll get you all disconnected and you'll be free to go.
What? I can leave?
Yep. See, the little green bar is all filled up on the screen, and then there's a little smiley face. Like a little happy emoji.
That's great.
I can go make a call to arrange for you to be picked up, and then I'll pop back in here, get those plugs out, and you'll be on your way.
Okay.
You'll probably want to take it easy for the rest of the day. Drink a lot of water, and I mean a lot. And just take a nap. You should feel 100% in about 3 days.
Right. Hey, Doc.
Yes?
When you call, can you do me a little favor?
Sure thing. What's that?
Tell Mason it's Digby with a Y.
Thank you for listening to Digital Folklore. I'm Dr. Sphynkyll. You should join the Digital Folklore Discord. There's a link in the show notes, and the people there are great. If you love this podcast, consider supporting it on Patreon at patreon.com/digitalfolklore. Special thanks this episode to Jeana Jorgenson and GennaRose Nethercott for providing their insight and expertise. You'll definitely be hearing more from them soon, and you can find links to their work in the show notes. Thank you as well to our voice actors this episode. Myself, Dr. Sphynkyll, am played by Tucker Bettez from PodCube, and Digby was played by Brooke Jennett from 13. You can find more about all of us and the links to our other works in the show notes. Digital Folklore is a production of 8th Layer Media and distributed by Realm. You should join the Digital Folklore Discord. There's a motorcycle outside.